Welcome, Drink with James, episode 26. I am reporting live from the end of the Republic, ladies and gentlemen. So we continue with the business of influence, and maybe I'll actually step back and say that I think that this election surprised a lot of people. And the night of the election, I was looking at the numbers and said, 130, 140 million people voted. And FourCard, the directory, reaches 837 million people a month. And I think a lot of influencers were reluctant to share their views, whether they were Trump supporters or Hillary supporters or fucking Gary Johnson supporters, reluctant to share their views because they didn't feel like that space was supposed to be a political space. And I think a lot of people regretted it the day after the election. I don't think that you have to filter yourself. I don't think you have to censor yourself on your platform just because you generally talk about fashion. If you really believed in something, whether that be Hillary or Donald Trump, I wish I would have seen more influencers saying who they were voting for, using their platforms to get people out to vote. If you look at the numbers from Kansas and Kentucky and some of those smaller states where I know we have influencers, and you look at the number of people who voted, sometimes it was like 80,000 people voted for Hillary Clinton. 80,000 people, like a huge part of our platform has more than 80,000 followers. And so it's kind of an embarrassment that as young people we're not doing more to try and get people to get out and vote. Or more than half the country didn't vote. A lot of young people stayed home. A lot of millennials aren't out there voting. So I encourage you, with any issue that you believe in, to not censor yourself, to not say, well, I should stick to fashion. Fuck that. You have a following, they're following you, you're allowed to say whatever you want. And I hope that in 2 years at the midterms or 4 years in the next presidential election that we see a lot more honest political discussion on these platforms that y'all have built. Yeah, so if I start out today at 0 followers, it is a super crowded, difficult market to get into. I think that at this point, being a generalist isn't gonna work. That said, just being someone that talks a little bit about lifestyle and a little bit about fashion, a little bit about travel and a little bit about home design, I don't think that works in the same way that it would work for a really established big influencer. I think to build your following, you have to hone in on something specific and be crazy specific. We had a guy in the office, I can't tell you who he was, but he runs an anonymous account called What I'm Holding. And it is literally just photos of him holding things in his hands. And it works really well because I have 30 influencers, fashion influencers who I follow maybe in my feed, but I don't have a dude that holds things, So in that specific niche, he does an incredible job, and he is talking about brands and travel and all of these things in a really different, unique way. There's another one, I can't remember the name, I'll get it to Tim when he edits the video, but it's a woman who just holds up food. So she'll travel to a place and she holds up a traditional food from that place in front of monuments and stuff, but her whole feed is that same picture over and over and over again. If I was starting out today, I would have almost like a single serving account that just did one thing really well. I think that that's probably the only way to really build a following now, unless you have access to some crazy lifestyle because you're independently wealthy, unless you are one of the most attractive people on God's earth, and then things are pretty easy. Just take photos of yourself and that should take care of itself pretty quickly. For the rest of us, you have to have a gimmick. And when the platform gets filled, you have to think about, how can I fill these gaps? I'm not gonna, and if I can't do, something navy as well as something navy, then I need to think of a niche that I can own and go after that. I'd be on Instagram because it's the most active. I love Snapchat, and we're gonna talk about Snapchat in a minute. If I was starting out, I wouldn't start on Snapchat just because it's a struggle, I've been doing Snapchat every single day for years, and granted it's not that interesting, but I'm getting, 500 views. Is that worth it? Is that worth this much time of my life to be getting 500 fucking views on my Snapchat stories, and then I go, So anyway, we'll talk about that in a second. But Instagram, I'd have a blog. Vine shut down a couple weeks ago, or it announced that it is shutting down. I think it's really important to have a blog because you own that space. Nobody can take it away from you. Nobody can say, oh, we're pulling the funding for this platform that you have 1 million followers on. So sorry. So I really think it's still important for you to have a blog and to focus on that. What would my niche be if I was starting out today? That's a good question. The other day I was like sitting at home and I was like, I love photos of roads. Like I love that long, perspective. And I just love roads. I love driving and I love riding my bike. So I have a thing with roads and I was like, oh, maybe I should start an account that's only roads. That's all it is. It's just everyday beautiful roads. Because that's something I would like to follow. Now, I don't have the time to really do that, so I didn't, but those kinds of things I think can work. Is Snapchat worth starting? 6 months ago, I would have said 100% Snapchat's the future, you need to start it. Now, if I'm being totally honest, if I'm giving you the cookie cutter answer, I would say yeah, you should absolutely try it out. And it's important because it is still a platform that's growing very quickly. Obviously, it's resonating with young people. But for me, as a 32-year-old man, I don't know if it's worth investing really heavily in anymore. Instagram stories, if you already have a following on Instagram, your following is built into Instagram stories, so that's really great. I mean, I get a lot more, just personally, I get more interaction on Snapchat than I do on Instagram stories. I'm not totally sure why, but I get a lot more views on Instagram stories than I do on Snapchat. So for me, I still enjoy Snapchat. I think it's fun. I think it's more fun than Instagram stories, and that's why I do it. I do it because I enjoy it and I don't really take it very seriously. If you were just starting out and you had no following anywhere, I don't know unless you had a really clever idea for Snapchat, I don't think Snapchat would be a good place to start because there's no discovery engine on Snapchat. If they lose to Instagram, it will be because they didn't build a discovery platform. I mean, just today, Instagram allowed you to start linking to people's feeds inside of your Instagram stories. That should have been on Snapchat 2 years ago. So it's really hard to build a following on Snapchat unless you have a following somewhere else. There's no way for other Snapchat influencers to tag you yet. I mean, they should have built that years ago, but they haven't. If you open up your phone and say, I want to follow someone new on Snapchat, how do you find them? They basically have to have a following somewhere else, or someone has to have screenshotted their snap and put it onto Twitter or their blog or Instagram. It's basically impossible to grow a following on Snapchat unless you already have a following somewhere else. So pretty bad platform to grow a following, I would think, especially in the fashion world. I think if you're like a comedy person, maybe it's easier, but I'm not very funny, so I can't speak to that. I think if you have 200,000 Instagram followers and you haven't started a Snapchat, I would probably just use Instagram stories. If you have 200,000 Instagram followers and you're getting 5,000 views on Snapchat and you're enjoying it and it feels fun and organic and natural and awesome, then I would keep doing that. So yeah, creative blocks are like scary, right? And I think it comes less as a creative block as traditionally like a writer would have a writer's block, and more of just well, look, I was just talking about the election earlier, right? And when I closed the office yesterday, I said in Slack that for us to be good at our jobs, we need to be excited about them. And sometimes in order to be excited, we first have to stop being sad. And so I sent everyone home. And I think it's the same thing with influencers. What you do, you need to be excited about it. And if you're not excited about it, you need to take a step back and hit reset, because the damage that you can do to your platform and your following by putting out half-assed content that you don't care about is so much worse than taking 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks off. The interesting thing about social is that, especially inside of social, not so much on blogs. In a blog, if you type in jamesnord.com, feel free to do, jamesnord.com, and you go to it, and you enjoy whatever I posted recently. And then the next day, you get your coffee, and you type jamesnord.com, and there's nothing new. And then the next day, you type jamesnord.com, and there's nothing new. And then the next week, you type jamesnord.com, and there's nothing new. Then you say, this is fucking stupid. I'm going to stop typing in jamesnord.com, right? So consistency on the blog is so important because they actually have to make an effort to go to your blog. On Instagram, you could take 2 weeks off. Nobody's going to really notice. I mean, your followers will be like, hey, are you okay? Are you alive? We miss you. Love you. Come back. You know. But you could post 2 weeks later and then boom, you're back in the stream. You're back in there. Nothing's happened. So if you find yourself feeling like, I don't want to do this, I'm not feeling inspired, do literally anything other than what you're doing right then and there. As simple as I've seen people on like their Snapchats or Instagram stories just go black and white for 2 days. And even that can change it. Like create a challenge for yourself. Say, I want to create an Instagram story today. It's all going to be 1 second photos, you know, and I'm going to just like be really fast and take people through my day. Or I'm going to do 2 weeks on my feed of all black and white. Or I'm going to, you know, post 3 photos a day. You know, when I was shooting more, I used to wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to take 3 great photos today. That was my goal every single day. And I walked around the city sometimes till 2 in the morning until I got those photos if I didn't get them during the day. So you can do things to like set challenges, but if you're not feeling inspired, I would take a step back. I would go on a trip if you can afford to go travel, both time or money-wise. I would do that. That really helps sometimes. But there's no shame in stepping back. You think, look, y'all, like you do this 7 days a week, you know, and I think a lot of people disrespect what influencers do and say, oh, they just take photos of themselves and like, it's so easy. I should have been an influencer. But they don't think about when they wake up Sunday morning hungover and you say, I have to come up with 3 Instagram posts today and I have to make my life look interesting and chic and beautiful and all I want to do is sleep and watch Netflix. It's not easy, and it's a 7-day-a-week job, and most people take, you know, 2, 4, 6 weeks of vacation a year, and it's not crazy that you should give yourself that same thing. And I encourage social media blackout and putting everything down and just breathing and wearing sweatpants and drinking non-photogenic tea sometimes. It's totally okay, and y'all deserve it. So, look, episode 26 is out, and so am I. Cheers.